And I paid for it by getting rid of Bush's tax cuts for people who make over $200,000 a year. I want to talk about a couple other subjects before I take your questions. I want to say a word about Iran, because a lot of you have followed this news, I know. Maybe all of you followed it. Bush and Cheney have been rattling the saber on Iran, right? We've all seen it, you know. We've heard this language before. We heard it in the lead up to Iraq. And there was a very important vote that took place on the floor of the U.S. Senate a few weeks ago. And that vote was on whether to declare the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, an elite state militia in Iran, a terrorist organization. Now you can just guess who wants them declared a terrorist organization. Bush and Cheney. So the vote takes place on the floor. So I was against it, I'm against it, I'm strongly against it. You know, I think if you give this president an inch, he'll take a mile. And he cannot be trusted with any authority on this. So the issue goes to the Senate. The issue goes to the Senate. I want to give credit where it's due. Two people who are running against me for the nomination, Senator Dodd and Senator Biden, voted no. So they've stood up to the president. Senator Clinton voted yes. And she's entitled to do that. I just disagree with it. You know, here's what I worry about. I worry that 6 months from now, if Bush invades Iran, I mean, what are we going to hear? If only I'd known then what I know now. Right? I mean, how long does it take us to learn this lesson? I learned mine the hard way. And I know we've got to stand up to this president. And then I saw, about a week or so ago, a piece in the New York Times about why Senator Clinton voted this way. And some of her supporters, and I guess campaign members, said that she was moving from primary mode to general election mode. Now, did I miss something? Was I asleep in North Carolina when we had the Iowa caucus? I hope not. I hope not. Listen, we ought to say the same thing all the time. If you believe in something, you ought to believe it in the primary, you ought to believe it in the general election. You shouldn't change. And my view is, it is a huge mistake to give this president this authority. And that belief was reinforced today when Bush and Cheney and the administration declared the Iranian Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization. And on top of that, a proliferator of weapons of mass destruction. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Sounds familiar. So, I think we have to stand strongly against these people. I want to say one last thing, and then I'll take your questions, and then I want to say something at the end. I've talked about, at some length, about some of the problems that exist. But I want to, in the government, in the corruption. But I want to be really clear about something. There is nothing wrong that we can't fix. I mean, I am dead sure about that. I mean, I am relentlessly optimistic. That's who I am. But I believe it. I absolutely believe it. I believe that, first of all, I see you and I see people across Iowa all the time when I'm here. I know how good the American people are. And I know how strong they are. And I know they want a government that is like them. That's what they want. So a government that they can believe in and trust, that works for them. So these are things we can do something about. We don't have to sit quietly by and hope this will take care of itself. I mean, we have the power to do something about it. You have enormous power because you're a part of the First in the Nation caucus. But we have an opportunity here to make sure that our children have a better life than us, to do what 20 generations of Americans have done before us. And that is our sacred responsibility. And I think we're going to do it together. Thank you all very much for coming. I'll be glad to take your questions. Why don't we start with this gentleman right here. Just tell me your name if you don't mind.
I like the picture you're painting here. It's really a nice picture. Let's say we all do our job and get you to the White House. How can one man have enough strength and power to change all the things that are so embedded in our government today?
That's a very good question. Can you all hear the question back there? Basically what he's saying is, how can one man have the strength and power to change all the problems that are embedded in our system? I didn't say it'd be easy, and I don't think it would be easy. But what I know is, for example, drug companies, insurance companies. I've been fighting these people my whole life. And what I've learned is you have to beat them. And you have to beat them again, and eventually you'll win the battle. And I think what the president has to do is bring America to this effort. That's why it's important not to just have one man who does it, but to have a president who leads the American people to say, we're not doing this anymore. This is not all right. We're going to do something about this. And if members of Congress, which this lady spoke about a few minutes ago, members of Congress don't want to do something about it, then I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to their congressional district and their state, if they're a U.S. senator, and I'm going to tell the voters in that state what they're doing. That's exactly, as president. I'm going to say, I want you to know you have a congressman who's protecting his own health care, and he won't do anything about your health care. I mean, it's not my job as president to represent members of Congress. It's my job as president to represent the American people. And I will do that. Now, hopefully, they'll just do the right thing. But this system has to be changed. Ultimately, by the way, I didn't say this earlier, we should publicly finance all our campaigns.
Absolutely.
That's what we should be doing. And I will say one last thing on this, and this goes to all of you because you're caucus goers. I really do believe, and I hope, that here in Iowa we're going to have an election, not an auction. And we're not going to decide who can raise the most money, and they're going to be our nominee for president. That is not the test for what we need in the next president of the United States.
That's right.
Yes, ma'am, right here, and then I'll come to you.
What I'm wondering about is we talk about the lobbyists, and one of the things that I'm seeing is you hear about line item vetoes constantly. What I'm questioning as a citizen of the United States is when a bill goes before Congress and the president, it's got 62 attachments that have nothing to do with it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Why can't we as American people have a bill that's a bill?
There you go. There you go. You're
Absolutely
absolutely
right. And the other thing they do, they slip that stuff in the middle of the night. It's got nobody's name on it. You know, we ought to have complete accountability. The bill ought to be related to the issue that's before the Congress. You're right about that. Second, anything that's in it that somebody proposed and got in the proposed legislation ought to have their name on it. No more of this hiding from it. We're going to have accountability. These people are slipping this pork barrel crap into bills. It ought to be stopped, and they ought to be held personally, politically responsible for having done it. I agree with you completely about that. This gentleman right here.
You've spoken about affordable energy choices.
Yes.
I'd like to know what you feel about to make coal cleaner and how you can make that affordable to all Americans.
Sure.
The question is, he said, I've spoken about affordable, cleaner alternative energy sources, and what would I do to make coal cleaner and make it available to more Americans? Affordable. Well, I think there are a variety of things that we need to do. Can I do the whole picture, and then I'll include coal, because coal's a component of it. We have a crisis in America and in the world, and that crisis is called global warming. And it's not something for the distant future. It's a very serious crisis right now. And what I believe we should do is we ought to cap carbon emissions in America, a national cap. I think that cap ought to come down every year. I think below the cap, what we ought to do is make the polluters pay. In other words, these big companies that are putting out carbon dioxide, they ought to have to pay to get a permit to do it. And that money, which ought to be at least $30 billion, should be invested in clean alternative sources of energy. Wind, solar, cellulose-based biofuels. And I want to be clear about a couple of things. There are big differences between us and the Republicans on this. There are also some differences between the Democrats. And some of you may agree with the other Democrats, not me, but you need to know, you're entitled to know the differences. I am against building new nuclear power plants. Some of the other Democrats, so far, Senator Clinton and Senator Obama, have a different perspective on that. I'm against it because I think it's not safe. I don't think we have a good way to dispose of the waste, which stays around forever, and it's incredibly expensive to build. For coal, we ought to put at least $1 billion of that money into the development and implementation of carbon sequestration technology. That's what needs to be done. So, because realistically, we're going to be using coal for some time to come. And it's important that we be able to do it and do it in a way that's environmentally friendly. Beyond that, I think we ought to put $1 billion into making sure America's developing the most fuel-efficient, most innovative vehicles on the planet. I mean, some of the things that I've seen in parts of the country, like these plug-in hybrids, have enormous potential. Enormous potential. And then, this is the most radical idea that I have. I think we ought to have a president who, instead of, and I will do this, instead of going around the country and saying, I promise you this,